All right. So firstly, just want to thank you very much for talking to us today on this subject. Martyn's Law and the Protect Duty is obviously very relevant at the moment as the legislation is going through consultation within the Houses of Parliament and Houses of Commons. So I just wanted to really get your thoughts and also your experience, Neil, just on what the Protect Duty in Martyn's Law actually is.
Okay, basically it's a duty that's going to be placed on event organisers to comply with 5 requirements. So they should engage with freely available counter-terrorism training for their staff. They should conduct a vulnerability assessment of their operating spaces and places. They should mitigate the risks that are created by that vulnerability assessment. And they need to have a plan to deal with the terrorism-related incident. And finally, local authorities have to have a plan for the threat of terrorism.
Okay, gosh, that sounds quite a lot. So in terms of this new impact, this new legislation and the impact on the events industry, it sounds like it'll be fairly far-reaching.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for event organisers in both permanent and temporary publicly accessible locations, they're going to need to comply. Therefore, their stewards and their security staff should be enrolled on courses like Action Counter-Terrorism, the ACT training, but more importantly, their knowledge must be checked for understanding. A suitably qualified counter-terrorist expert should undertake a vulnerability assessment and report their findings of risks found. They should create an action plan showing how they intend to minimise, mitigate and manage any residual risks. And they need to write a counter-terrorism plan on the run, hide, tell principles, brief their staff and exercise that plan to ensure knowledge is in place. And local authorities, through the Safety Advisory Group or the SAG function, should expect organisers to evidence compliance prior to authorising an event.
Okay, so that sounds like an awful lot for people who potentially haven't been within this counter-terrorism and security space before to take on. So is there a large kind of gap between where we are now in the industry and also where we need to be to kind of fully embrace and adopt this new legislation and the movement towards the Protect Duty?
Well, ultimately, the Protect Duty itself has got to go through Parliament and become law. However, it's inevitable that in some way, shape or form is going to happen. So at the moment, what the industry needs to do is take the action so they're ahead of the curve. So it makes sense for them to adopt those proposals now. There's gaps have been identified. The findings of the Manchester Arena inquiry will continue to expose those gaps. Therefore, they need to enrol their staff on the ACT e-training through the NACSO website as a minimum. Like I said, they need to check how they've done it and a knowledge check, because what Manchester did expose was a number had just been flicking through the slides and paying no attention. Okay. Consulting with a qualified CT expert or their local CTSA to start that vulnerability assessment process. The latest crowded place guidance was published in November last year, so there's good documents out there for them to reference. They need to derive their action plan to mitigate any of the identified risks, and they need to write their CT plan to deal with terrorist incidents and exercise their staff. And they should consider engagement and guidance from the local resilience forum when they're doing that. Depending on the size of an arena, a local resilience forum will want to be involved. Obviously, smaller events, then potentially they won't, but certainly the big player events, the arenas and the O2s, etc., around the country, they would want to be involved in that.
Okay, that was actually going to be one of my next questions. So obviously a lot of this has come out of the tragic attack on the Manchester Arena in 2017. So what sort of events and what sort of infrastructure are actually realistically going to have to be implementing these forms of measures, because a crowded place could be, a lot of cafe revelers all in one place on a pavement, for instance, versus an event like a big sporting event within a stadium or within an arena. So who do you think actually needs to consider this type of legislation?
I think everyone's going to have to consider this legislation, whether you're putting on a 10,000 event, spectator event concert or or some other form of event, or you're running a hospitality business that can take 100 people.
Okay.
It applies equally to both. Obviously, the measures, a bit like the Health and Safety at Work Act, the measures that you have to do have got to be proportionate. Got to be proportionate with your business model. But there's no reason why anyone who runs any form of event that welcomes people in as a publicly accessible location doesn't have to do this. So you're going to have some form of plan, some form of training for your door staff. It's no good just putting an SIA accredited person on the door if they don't understand counter-terrorism, run, hide, tell, and all the rest of the components, if you like, that make up a good counter-terrorist reactionary plan for an incident. Then you're wasting your time. So they've all got to do it. It's just how they need to do it and the level they need to go to. But everyone must consider it.
The key term there that you used was proportionate, actually, and I think that's really important. There is a small concern, I believe, that the security function will kind of be taken in and tagged on to the health and safety function, which might already be in existence within various different sizes of organisation. Do you share that same concern?
I don't think it's a concern. I think, again, it's about proportionality, because depending on the size of your business and your organisation, you might not have enough to employ someone permanently doing security. The danger is if bigger organisations dilute an already existing role and add security to it without providing adequate training or checking the experience and the competence of the person they've given that role to. You know, being in charge of stewarding and safety, in my book, is slightly different to understanding security. And you know, security is a much bigger beast than that. You're looking at the protection of the people, and in particular the counter-terrorism side. You're looking at how you're going to deal with it, with an incident as it develops, what's going to be in place. And it's a little bit more than checking tickets and patting people down on the way in. So
yeah. Okay. It's a little bit more slightly different risk that you're trying to mitigate within that role with your security head screwed on. So with all that to consider, and with a lot of potential training to undertake, a lot of which is going to be available free, which is obviously going to be very helpful for businesses, how can the security industry help to support these event companies that have already been, you know, very hard hit by COVID, for instance, over the last 12 to 18 months? Is there anything we can do to support them in this transition?
Absolutely. I think those who've got the necessary expertise should offer their services to the event industry. Those who don't should direct clients to CTSA's network, which, you know, is available to all businesses. The HS Security website lists our security experts and their areas of expertise. You know, we produce a checklist for physical security. It's an excellent starting point when considering a vulnerability assessment. I think people have got to provide the correct guidance. Product proposal must come before profit. If they don't make the required product, then recommend someone who does. And I think above all, you've got to remember that one size does not fit all.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right, Neil, well, I found that really interesting. So thank you very much today for talking to us about the Protect Duty. And we will continue to watch with interest as this goes through consultation.